Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. So in this video we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead, but only seasons 1 and 2, so you'll be mostly spoiler free, so don't worry if you're not caught up with the latest seasons. The Walking Dead is in its final season after 11 years. Think about that, 11 years. Where were you 11 years ago? When you go back and watch season 1, that show is unrecognizable for what it is today, and I think that this is all thanks to the show's most crucial season, the most important season in the Walking Dead franchise. That is season number 2. Yes, that is the season with the farm that everyone says is really slow and really bad, and I'm going to talk about the season's flaws in a second. But this is the season that transitioned the group and the show into a new era. The season made mistakes, but it learned from them. This is the show where The Walking Dead became the show that it is today. This season also contains what I think is the best, most crucial scene in the entire show. But more on that scene later. First, let's provide a little context for this season. Now, season 1 was very much about a group of regular people banding together to try to get their bearings in a zombie apocalypse story. Now, this was groundbreaking because most zombie movies didn't have the time to explore what comes after the zombie attack. They focus on the survivors escaping from a herd, or a mall, or a house, or whatever. And then, we don't really get to see what happens next to civilization. The Walking Dead answers that zombie apocalypse question. What comes next? The driving question, the dramatic question of the entire series isn't, will they escape from zombies? It's, will they be able to rebuild civilization? Where does all this end? What's the point of living? And season 2 is where they started to ask those very important questions. Season 1 and 2 are very much about the group looking for structure, trying to regain what they've lost. They want civilization. They find the CDC, they get hot showers, and they think their nightmare is over. This was their ultimate hope, the place that they could rebuild from, and it was destroyed. So it does make sense that when the group finds a nice farm that's unmolested by walkers, they want to stay, raise babies, and rebuild civilization. A few episodes earlier, the group was stalled on the freeway, and they hid from a herd of walkers. Sophia was separated from the group, and they all spread out to find her. Carl has a magical moment with a deer, which was interrupted when he was shot. He was accidentally shot by a hunter who's staying at this nearby farm with his extended family, and the farm is owned by Herschel, who happens to be a doctor. So while Carl heals up, the group stays at the farm, and they like it. They want to stay, but Herschel wants them to move on. Meanwhile, Lori is pregnant, maybe with Shane's baby, so she and Rick really want to stay on the farm to raise the kid. Meanwhile, Shane is climbing the walls, thinking he should be with Lori instead of Rick because he can make the hard choices to protect the group and the family.
Survival, Rick. It means making hard decisions, but you got this knack, man. You spread us thinner and thinner. I'm trying to save lives here, and you're out saving cats from trees.
Along the way, he trains Andrea how to shoot, and they smash. Dale really doesn't trust Shane, and just before this scene, he tried to hide all the guns from him because he had a feeling that he was going to snap. Now the group are trying to follow Herschel's wishes and not carry any guns on his property. In particular, Glenn wants to do right by Maggie because they have feelings for each other. Now, the problems with the season are mostly behind the scenes. They stem from the infamous disputes between showrunner Frank Darabont and the network AMC. Now, Frank Darabont was the showrunner for Walking Dead Season 1, and he's also the guy who wrote and directed this.
Get busy living, or get busy dying.
And there's a lot of he said, she said behind the scenes stuff here, but the gist seems to be that Darabont wanted tighter control of the series, and he was shocked when AMC slashed his budget for season 2. Do more with less, they told him. So Darabont left the show, and he won a $200 million lawsuit, and proud we are of all of him. Glenn Mazzara then took over the show and had to find a way to save money. The solution was to stick to one main location, the farm, and to pad the episodes with lots and lots of dialogue.
Your friends don't want to know it. They'd rather...
You don't think I would have done it? No, man, I know you wouldn't. You don't think...
Shane's just scared.
Think there's any flowers?
Not to leave us.
I don't know.
Listen.
But even if it's yours, it's not going to be yours. It's never going to
The people that we were, the world that we knew is dead.
And the source material, the comics, they're not on this farm for very long. The show really stretched this out. But when you rewatch the season, you notice something important. Episodes 1 through 3 are sharp and kinetic. There's a sense of danger pressing down upon the group at all times, while character developments are always playing out in the background.
And if I decided that I had nothing left to live for, who the hell are you to tell me otherwise?
This is when The Walking Dead is at its best, when internal conflicts, like Shane's heel turn, are driven by external threats, like when he kills Otis. After episode 3, the characters reach the farm, and the external threats stop dead in their tracks. There are far fewer zombies, and no humans are around to threaten the farm. Instead, the show is driven by two questions. Will they find Sophia, and will Carl live? Episode 4 does a nice job of slowing down and letting the characters worry about these kids. It even has this really touching scene where Daryl gives Carol a Cherokee rose.
On the Trail of Tears, the Cherokee mothers were grieving and crying so much because they were losing their little ones along the way. The next day, this rose started to grow right where the mother's tears fell.
And this scene is actually the foundation for their extremely strong bond that will play out over the next 9 seasons. So we have these two kids, we don't know if they're going to live or die, and that can make for great TV. But season 2 is forced to stretch out these plot points for way too long. Characters remain static for most of the season. Or, like Andrea, the characters change, but then they have nothing to do for several episodes. Like T-Dog, they have all this time to fill, and T-Dog's arc is that he gets a cut on his arm.
Let's just go. Let's just take Dobby.
You've gone off the deep end.
A few moments later.
What I said on the highway, I don't know what that was.
And if I can nitpick for a second, the reveal that the walkers are in the barn was at the end of episode 5, and it doesn't actually play out until episode 7. I think that they should have revealed the walkers were in the barn at the end of episode 3, when the group starts to arrive at the farm. The audience should have been given this information before Glenn, so it would have been a ticking time bomb that we knew about, but the group didn't. This also would have made us question Herschel's family, what they're up to, and the whole time we would be thinking, you gotta get out of that farm. I am nitpicking though. But people think of Walking Dead Season 2 as a bad season, and it's not. It's really just 4 or 5 slow episodes that amble and repeat themselves because the show is still trying to figure out what it wants to be. And that's really why The Walking Dead Season 2 is so important. You don't learn from your successes, you learn from your mistakes. And Season 2 is filled with mistakes, false starts, and repetitive character beats. I mean, how many times can Shane tell Lori he's leaving? She says go, then she says stay. It's back and forth all season long. It's all very dry and redundant. That is, until the scene that changed The Walking Dead forever. But more on that scene a little later. First, we have to talk about how this entire season was setting up the dramatic question for the show. What comes next? After we get away from the zombies, what do we want to become? How do we adapt? How do the rules change? Does life still have meaning? Is life even worth living? So I'm going to explain how Season 2 begins to ask those questions, and how it marked the beginning of the show's key external conflicts, when the show transitioned away from fighting the walkers to fighting the living. This season is the group's final goodbye to the lives they knew, and it's heartbreaking. So you remember Rick's rule in Season 1.
We don't kill the living.
If this rule would have stuck for the whole show, then this would have been the most boring show on Earth. The zombies aren't interesting enough to be a sustainable threat for 11 seasons, but humans are. The Walking Dead is at its best when it pushes humans to their limits and tests the strength of their morality. At the start of Season 2, the group is hopeful that they can still find civilization. They're looking for Fort Benning. They cling to their old lives. Carl is homeschooled. Herschel thinks they can find a cure.
Just hoping we can ride it out in peace till there's a cure.
They debate whether or not to kill a prisoner, where in later seasons they just kill people in their sleep. So each character in this season has to ask themselves, what kind of person will I become? So let's briefly go over the season's different storylines and look at how they all serve this central theme. The first overarching conflicts of the season are the hunt for Sophia and Carl getting shot. Now this is making everybody wonder if this world can be safe for the next generation to live in. Later in the season, Lori insists that Carl not even be taught how to shoot a gun, showing that she and most of the group are in denial about how bad the world is. Now after Carl gets better, the main conflict of the season is Rick versus Shane. But in a metatextual way, it's a conflict of ideologies. Shane sees the world for what it will soon become, while Dale clings to the way things used to be.
You really want to debate about saving a guy who will lead his buddies right to our door?
That's what a civilized society does.
While Rick is trying to negotiate between the two. He wants to find a way to survive, but also to live, to be worthy of survival. So those are the overarching plots of the season. Within them, we have the Lori, Rick, Shane love triangle, which takes way too long to play out, but the root of the love triangle is the question, is Rick strong enough to protect his family?
You don't think I can keep Lori or Carl safe?
Shit anymore.
You can do it, man.
It's my call, man.
I don't think you can keep them safe.
And then there's the Shane, Andrea, and Dale dynamic. Shane toughens Andrea up. She moves away from Dale's overprotectiveness and learns to protect herself. But more importantly, she begins the season wanting to kill herself.
I wanted to die my way. Not torn apart by drooling freaks. That was my choice.
But then she finds new purpose. Now this is another sub-theme of the season that Lori struggles with. Is life even worth living anymore? She almost aborts her baby to spare it this world.
Want me to bring a baby into this? To live a short, cruel life?
This question comes to a head when Beth wants to kill herself.
I want to go. In this bed. Tonight.
But she can't go through with it. See, Andrea realized that Beth needed to make the choice to live all by herself.
She wants to live. She made her decision.
Andrea is one of the first to realize that in a world where you're literally surrounded by walking death, if you don't want to live, then you can't survive. The season also asks, what's the point of the group even staying together? Daryl could leave at any point. I think that's actually what he's going to do at the start of the season. But Carol won't let him withdraw from the group.
I'm not gonna let you pull away.
Maggie and Glenn also become a thing in this season, and their relationship shows us that people can still fall in love in a world this broken. In T-Dog's arc, alright, let me just say this. The writers ignored the only African American on the show and turned Lori into a nagging shrew. These were mistakes that they would learn from in later seasons when the writing for women and minorities got significantly better, boosted by several cast members from The Wire. But the main conflict of the season is the group having to decide what kind of world they're going to build. In the last few episodes, they encounter another group that they know would take the farm by force and rape the women.
One night, we found this little campsite. A man and his two daughters. Teenagers, you know, real young, real cute.
They show mercy on one of them, they fix him up, but then they realize that he could lead the others back to the farm.
I went to school with Maggie, for God's sake!
Shane immediately sees this danger and wants to kill the kid. And by the way, he's right, but Dale still clings to the old world.
If we do this, we're saying there's no hope. Rule of law is dead. There is no civilization.
He even predicts what the human race is going to become in a few seasons.
And this new world is ugly. It's harsh. It's a survival of the fittest.
See, Dale is the moral rock of the group, but the season proves that he's very wrong. Humanity has essentially regressed into tribalism and barbarism, and the group is very slow to learn this truth. Herschel thinks that there will be a cure, so he keeps an army of hungry necromonsters on his land and feeds them perfectly good chickens that should be used to feed the living. And that brings us to the scene, the most crucial scene in The Walking Dead, the scene that would forever change the characters' views of the world and of themselves. Shane kills the walkers in the barn.
What the hell are you doing?
So here is where we're at this point. Glenn has recently discovered that Herschel keeps walkers in the barn because he's convinced that someday he'll be able to find a cure for them. One of the zombies is even his dead wife, so there's a really strong emotional attachment there. Herschel even asks Rick to help him rescue a walker to prove that he can follow his rules and stay on his farm. Now while he's gone, Shane starts to rally everyone in the group to clean out the walkers.
It was one thing standing around here picking daisies when we thought this place was supposed to be safe, but now we know it ain't.
Shane even makes the decision to give Carl a gun, which his parents have forbidden up until now.
I want you to take this. You take it, Carl, you keep your mother safe, you do whatever it takes, you know how. Go and take the gun and do it.
Shane is making an alpha male move. He's trying to take over Rick's family and the group. This is a unilateral decision to enforce his own will on the group. This is laying the foundation for other strongman types that we'll see in later seasons, like the governor.
This is not your call. This is not your decision to make.
But then the group sees Rick rescuing a walker. Now this makes them lose faith in his leadership, and they are ready to do things Shane's way.
These things ain't sick. They're not people. They're dead. They're the things that killed Amy. They killed Otis.
Then Shane makes a very compelling argument about why Herschel is wrong.
If someone who's alive, could they just take that? Why is it still coming? That's its heart. Its lungs. Why is it still coming?
And it all leads up to this.
Shane, enough!
Hey, you right, man. That is enough.
They just crossed a line. Everyone knows it. This is the moment when the balance of power starts to shift away from Herschel and Rick and towards Shane. But more importantly, it's when everyone starts to feel powerful. They've spent weeks living in fear, and Shane just made them feel like they were in control. Then he lays out some harsh truths.
Enough! Risking our lives for a little girl who's gone! Enough! Living next to a barn full of things that are trying to kill us! Enough!
And then, the biggest truth of all.
Rick, it ain't like it was before!
And then, Shane shows them exactly what kind of world they live in. He places everybody in a life or death situation to show that choice is a luxury.
Now, if y'all want to live, if you want to survive, you gotta fight for it. I'm talking about fight right here, right now.
The violence puts Herschel in shock because he's too civilized. He's kept himself from acknowledging what the world has become. Now Glenn and Rick plead with Shane to stop, but when the walkers come out of the barn, there's no longer any hesitation. Andrea is the first to join Shane because he's the one who helped her overcome her powerlessness by giving her a gun and making her feel powerful. Faced with this life or death situation, Glenn briefly asked for Maggie's permission before running in to help. Now when you look at Maggie, you can see that this scene isn't badass. It's heartbreaking. Herschel and his family are being forced to see that they were living a lie. Those aren't people in the barn, they're monsters. And there will always be some outside group who want to come into their farm and force them to see the world the way it actually is, not how they want it to be. They're watching civilization die. The camera movement is dynamic. Up until now, the farm's mostly been filmed with static shots for dialogue. This is our first action scene on this setting, and it's jarring. The carnage slows down as the last two walkers are taken out by one shot. The cicadas sing in the background. The music rises. What's done is done. They try to gather themselves and face the enormity of what they've done, but there's one walker left. I love how this reveal is so slow in contrast to the fast pace of the shootout. The shots linger for longer, and Sophia is revealed in one shot, starting on her feet as the camera slowly tilts up. It's as if we're part of the group, seeing her for the first time. That's when they all realize just how right Shane was. Their search was futile. Death always wins, and death was walking beside them all along. The camera glides across the dead for a close-up on her face, so everyone and the audience can see that there's no little girl here. This is death wearing the face of a child. One by one, the camera lets the revelation sink in, and Shane, for all his hard talk, can't raise his gun. But Rick steps forward to show that he is the one who can adapt to this world. He can stare death in the face and put it down. It's an incredible, haunting moment. The moment the entire season was building toward, the turning point for the entire show. It's when we realize that death isn't a question on The Walking Dead, it's a certainty. It's not who will die, but when will they die.